Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Kendall Wolbrin, and I'm an Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admission here at Santa Clara University. And we appreciate you taking time out of your day, whether it's afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you're joining us from today. But we're excited to be able to share a little bit more about Santa Clara as you help your students navigate the admission process this year. So before we get started, I'll just go ahead and note that we have muted all of you. I don't believe you have the capability to unmute yourselves at this point, but if you find that you do, please keep yourselves muted. We have over 100 participants on Zoom today, and I anticipate that number to keep growing, and so it just gets a little chaotic if there's noise coming from everywhere. We do welcome your questions, though, throughout the presentation. So if you have questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. I'll be moderating the chat, and we'll pose some of those questions to our panelists when we get to the Q&A. But before we do that, I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. Also, just noting that we are live streaming this event. So if you're watching on the live stream, please know that you are not able to ask questions. Only those on Zoom will be able to post questions in the chat. If there is definitely still room on the Zoom call, if you'd rather switch over to Zoom to be able to ask questions. So to introduce our panelists to get started today, we have three of them joining us. First is AJ Howell Williams. He's a Senior Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission here at Santa Clara, works with me in the Undergraduate Admission Office. We also have Skeet, Senior Director of Leadership Ethics in the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara. And finally, Dr. Jim Bennett, Associate Provost of Undergraduate Studies and Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Santa Clara. So we're covering many areas across campus. If you have questions about academics, other opportunities at Santa Clara, the admission process, we're happy to answer any of those questions. Before we get into the questions, I'll go ahead and let our panelists say a little bit more about who they are and what they do on campus. So AJ, if you want to start, again, tell us a little bit more about your role, how long you've been at Santa Clara.
Hey everybody, hope, as Kendall said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to some of you. Yes, AJ Williams, I'm one of the old guys in the office, so I've been at the university for quite a while, did not attend the university, my wife did, but I've worked there for going on 14 or 15 years. So I'm in undergraduate admission, I'm in charge of the transfer process. I also oversee athletic recruitment from the admission side, but I have some first-year territories as well.
Athletic what?
Thanks, AJ. Anne, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name's Skeet. I work at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics, which is one of the 3 centers of distinction on Santa Clara's campus. I've been there for about 6 years. My background is from industry and nonprofit leadership. I look at issues in the business and leadership ethics space primarily, and I work with students in internships and fellowships through the Markkula Center.
Thanks, Anne. Jim, do you want to go last?
Sure. Again, welcome everybody. My name is Jim Bennett. I am an associate professor in the Religious Studies Department, where I teach in the area of American religious history. And I have actually just stepped down from the associate provost role, where I oversaw a number of academic programs in the undergraduate area, including the core curriculum, residential learning communities, academic advising, honors, summer sessions, the LEAD program for first generation scholars, a number of those things. And I have, I'm filling in right now as the interim director of the core curriculum on my way to sabbatical starting in January as I transition back to the faculty. And I have been at Santa Clara, this is my 19th year here.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So we have a few questions that we've pulled ahead of time that we'll start with, and then we'll open it up for questions coming in through the chat. I've seen already a few that have come in, and I know we'll address some of them in these first questions, but please let us know if you have questions. We're happy to answer any others you may have. First, I'll go ahead and start with you, AJ. I know this has been a big topic of discussion for our students and their families. as we all navigate the new test optional world of college admission. So do you want to describe a little bit about what it means to be test optional at Santa Clara and how this test optional policy will impact a student's consideration for admission and then for merit scholarships or other need-based financial aid?
Sure, and I was just addressing one of the parents in the chat, but to Kim and to all the other parents, we are test optional for the next 2 years, and so really what that means is that students will be considered the same for admission, for any type of aid consideration, merit-based consideration, regardless of whether or not we have scores for them. And so, hopefully that's a weight off everybody's shoulders. We know with COVID, that has really made it tough to even be able to sit down and take a test. Again, just to make it clear, we will consider students the same for admission, for any type of funding. Any applicant is automatically considered for merit-based monies, regardless of when they apply, early or regular. Those monies are tough to come by at Santa Clara, though. Probably only our top 10 to 12% of our admitted pool receives merit. And so students are automatically considered. And again, that is regardless of whether or not they have any standardized test scores. We will consider those if submitted as additional information, if you will.
Awesome, thanks, AJ. I've seen a lot of questions in the chat about test optional, so I'm glad we got that covered early. And just to everyone who is entering questions in the chat, feel free to send them to everyone, not just me privately. That way everyone knows what's being asked and we don't duplicate questions. But next, oh yeah, AJ?
Just one quick thing that folks are like hitting me on the side. And so there's just one sort of myth that's out there that I want to dispel right away. A lot of folks are talking about the amount of students who have deferred this year and whether or not that's going to impact next year's class. Quite frankly, that is a myth that's just running rampant out there. I think a lot of folks are concerned about it, but the reality is I think schools are going to be trying to bring in their largest classes for the next couple of years. In order to sort of make up for the hit that that universities are taking financially this year. And so, no, there was a slight uptick.
So they'll admit more kids.
Folks need to mute their computers, but yeah, so no, that won't be an issue. The amount of folks who are deferring this year, it's not even a huge uptick from what we usually see. So you'll be fine.
Perfect. Thanks for addressing that early, AJ, too. I know that's a question we've been getting a lot. Anne, I'll go ahead and pose the next one to you. And if anyone else wants to chime in, any of the other panelists want to chime in here, feel free to add on after Anne goes. But what advice do you have for parents and families who are navigating this very unfamiliar school year, both in high school for a lot of students and then as they approach that transition to college during such uncertain times? And how do we balance ethical responsibility and a desire for normalcy and to return to what we used to do all the time in this space?
Great, thanks. Well, first of all, I should also include that I'm answering from the perspective of a parent of a current college student. My daughter Emma is a sophomore at another Jesuit university. And so I've had the opportunity to talk with her and see sort of what her experience has been, and then also to talk over some of the issues with the students that we work with at the center. And I guess parents and children need some of the same things while they're looking at colleges remotely that we've needed throughout the pandemic. We need to kind of acknowledge what has changed and maybe some losses, but also celebrate kind of our ability to adapt to the current situation and to find and identify the upsides. And there are some. I think the test optional might be considered an upside in many households. Take some of the pressure cooker feeling off. It might be the case that you can look at more schools because you're doing some of your preparation for that online and you don't have to travel to all of them. You can, the costs of visiting schools are down. So sort of trying to find those silver linings. The things that students are enjoying about the moment is they feel like it's helping them prepare for their future, frankly, in a very productive, helpful way, and giving them skills that they are going to need. It's helping them to understand and appreciate financial literacy a little bit, how they're saving money, building up savings, you know, all the different things that come into play as they prepare to become adults on their own. They're doing a great job, I think, of identifying ways to stay healthy through physical activity and connection to the natural world. And I know that many of them have talked about the fact that, yeah, at times there's some loneliness, but they're also figuring out ways to tap into what we have at the university, whether that's our activities program board or to deepen some of their friendships with friends in sort of pods and kind of little cozier connection rather than the broader kind of interactions that they have when they're on campus. So those are some of the things that we've been hearing from students. I think they also have said that they are enjoying the extra time with their family, and they like the feeling of being able to help their families if they're actually doing school from home right now, but also that they need kind of some boundaries. They need mom and dad to know they can't be doing chores in the middle of class time, that their demeanor during the school year is different than when they're home for vacations and breaks. So if they seem a little, you know, shorter and that kind of thing, that's just part of their focus and intensity in the school year. Overall, I think the students are feeling, and I know our family are feeling very grateful, frankly, for the adaptability, the flexibility that all the universities have shown in trying to kind of meet this unusual moment. In terms of ethics, I'll just speak briefly since I do work at the Ethics Center and we have a framework for ethical decision making. That's something we share with students at orientation, and we try and weave into every single class at Santa Clara. And it is a requirement that students participate in ethics programming at some point in their 4 years. So they'll get exposed to kind of thinking through things in this way. But right now, we're just encouraging people to think about the relationships they have and prioritize accordingly, balance kind of what they need to keep themselves healthy and the health and safety of their loved ones, and also the people they have obligations to. So we all have different roles we're in: child, student, employee, caregiver. So you do the best to create the conditions so you can be your best self. I think this is a time when people are naturally more aware of how we're more interconnected in society. And so we can appreciate how we all contribute to the common good. And maybe that's something that is in sharper focus right now. It's just easier for people to really see that and acknowledge those shared interests. We know that people have been asked to sacrifice some of their individual freedoms and liberties to kind of meet this responsibility. But that's being done in the context of asking ourselves how what we're doing is creating, you know, the most good and doing the least harm. And I think preventing the least harm, you know, preventing harm is where a lot of our attention has been. And I know the suggestions that I mentioned from our students are great reminders on how they can stay focused on positive and, you know, good things that are happening, even though things have changed substantially from what they expected. And we are asking ourselves to consider what's just and fair. In the early days of the pandemic, this was maybe a little harder to understand and be clear about because we really didn't know a lot about the virus or the conditions we'd be operating in. As we become more aware of how it's impacting populations and impacting some more seriously than others, then it gives us a better sense of who the vulnerable populations are and that need extra attention and care, and our responsibilities to those people.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne, for thoroughly answering that question for us. I'll quickly address a question that came in asking if the session is recorded. Yes, we are recording, or it is recorded through the live stream, and I'll also go ahead and record it here to make sure that we have it in multiple places. But by the end of the month, all of our live presentations from the virtual open house week that your students are participating in this week will be on our YouTube channel. So you will have access to this information later on. Next, Jim, I'll pose this question to you. Would you mind describing the academic environment at Santa Clara a little bit? What kind of student really thrives in our academic experiences at Santa Clara?
Yeah, sure. And Anne's opening line was one that I wanted to share with you as well, that I'm a parent of two college students, a senior and a freshman. So the freshman is doing his online classes at his university right next to me doing mine here. So I've been through this process that you're going through twice now, and I know some of you have been through it and others are first. So, and I can definitely empathize with this, what's going on. I think this one of the strengths of Santa Clara's academic environment is this really wonderful mix of depth, of a student's major and special area of focus, but also breadth, a core curriculum that is for all undergraduate students. So whether you are in engineering, business, or any of the many majors in the College of Arts and Sciences, you will still have the same core curriculum, which really expresses a lot of the university's values in there. So classes on ethics and diversity and experiential learning for social justice, where you're out working in the community. And students are even doing that online right now. So an online transition has not compromised sort of the values that we're trying to articulate there, the religion, theology, and culture, second language. So all students participate and get that breadth, sort of what we often talk about as a liberal arts education. And I think that really frames the academic environment at Santa Clara. And we have faculty that are really committed to teaching that. So the students who thrive in that context are students who have the intellectual curiosity, not just for their particular major, but to engage a broad range of interdisciplinary, interconnected areas of study. When I teach the religion, theology, and culture requirement classes, I have students from every major in my classes. And that's what makes it this really wonderful, rich, stimulating environment, because everyone's coming from these different places. So I think that intellectual curiosity is really what drives success, and an openness to learning in those areas. And I think students who know how to advocate for themselves, Santa Clara has tremendous intellectual and co-curricular opportunities, and having the ability to seek those out, but also the ability to ask for help. We also have tremendous support structures, academic advising, student services. And so students who can advocate for themselves, but that includes asking for help, including with faculty who, we teach small classes. We're all really committed teachers. We notice when students aren't there in class and check on them, and we want to help and support students. So I think students that can navigate that curiosity, that advocacy, but also that ability to seek to take advantage of the structures that the university provides are the students that succeed.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Just quickly, I'll address a few questions that have come in about kind of what Santa Clara looks like this fall based on the pandemic and how we've adapted. So students are not on campus this fall. Our classes are in a virtual format. So most students are at home. We do have some upperclassmen students who are living off campus in apartments or houses that they had already leased ahead of this school year, so they had made that commitment. So the library is open, the dining hall is open on campus for some of those students nearby, and for the rare exceptions to students who did need to be housed on campus this fall. But for the most part, everything is online right now. We are hopeful that for winter quarter starting in January, we will be able to welcome some students back onto campus, and the university should be making an announcement on those plans in the next week or two. So we're hopeful to hear that some students may be able to come back in January. And we are on the quarter system though, so if it can't happen for the winter quarter in January, we could still welcome students back in April in the spring. There have been one or two questions I've seen about what next fall will look like. I think we all wish we had the answers to that right now. Ultimately, the goal is to have students on campus. For this fall, we were hopeful we would be able to. Ultimately, the county guidelines and restrictions in Santa Clara County did not allow us to, but the initial hybrid plan did prioritize incoming first-year students for on-campus housing. So I imagine next fall, in the unfortunate situation that we were not able to bring everyone back, your students would have priority to be here if we had half capacity housing, say. So we are hopeful by next fall, everyone will be able to be back on campus and it will be more of a normal college experience, but obviously no one knows what the next month will hold or next year will hold. So all of that is still very tentative. So we'll go ahead and kind of jump into some of the questions that have come into the chat. Just as a precursor to this Q&A, we will not be able to answer all of these questions live on the panel. I'll put an email into the chat at the end that if you have questions after tonight, you're welcome to email the admission office and we'll connect you with anyone or answer the questions that you and your students still have. But we'll try to get through as many as we can that I think apply to the majority of people on the call. So this first one, Jim, I'm going to throw back at you. So it acknowledges that Santa Clara is a Jesuit university, but asks, can you speak to the inclusivity of all religious backgrounds at Santa Clara?
Yes, deeply inclusive. There is no requirement to be Catholic or any requirement to participate in the Catholic life of the university. What Santa Clara offers, and this is true of faculty and staff as much as it is of students as well, is that we have, I'm not Catholic, for example, we have a set of commitments to Jesuit Catholic ideals that really focus on the importance of understanding spiritual dimensions of life, of solidarity with those on the margins, a commitment to seeing God in all people, in all things. And there are many, many ways that people from all religious traditions and none, which is the fastest growing religious affiliation right now, right, can connect with that. And so there, even within campus ministry, there are a range of folks there to serve a wide range of religious groups. And I will say within my own home academic department of religious studies, we teach to every religious tradition and to none. And so I think all students feel comfortable in that intellectual engagement with understanding religion and its function in society. And so it's a deeply inclusive place that is very committed to welcoming people of all religious traditions. And it is an increasingly religiously diverse campus. Even in the 19 years I've been here, I've seen tremendous growth in the religious diversity of the campus, which very much reflects the religious diversity of where we are here in Silicon Valley.
Thanks, Jim. I would echo everything he said. And just in terms of numbers, about 50% of our students will self-identify as Catholic or Christian on the Common App. That definitely doesn't mean they're active in those religions when they come to campus, but rather typically what they've been raised in. The other 50% represent just about every other faith tradition or no faith tradition at all, as Jim mentioned. So there is quite a bit of religious diversity on our campus. AJ, I'm going to throw this next one to you, and it's kind of a multi-part question, but we've seen a few come in the chat, kind of just about the application process in general. What different application options, early decision versus early action and regular decision are available, and what kinds of decisions can students receive from Santa Clara when they apply? So admit versus deny and defer.
Sure. Yeah, and so you know, November 1st is the deadline for early decision, which is binding, and early action, which is not. January 7th is the deadline for regular decision, which is the period where we still receive the bulk of our applications. And then we have early decision 2, which is just a later binding option. That deadline is also January 7th. And so, excuse me, my advice is really that a student should just simply apply when they're the strongest. If they can look at their situation right now, their GPA is about as strong as it's going to be. They've challenged themselves with the kind of courses that they've taken. They're not really banking on progress in senior year. Then go ahead and apply early, because you'll find out sooner. When you apply early, either decision or action, the options are you can either be admitted, or you can be in a situation where we say, you know what, we want to see how senior year is coming along. We will defer a student to the regular pool, or a student could be denied. And if they're denied, then we're talking about transferring down the line at some point. But if a student is in the ballpark, at the very least, they would be deferred. I did see a question in terms of, you know, applying to the business school and is it competitive? Business last year was our most popular program. When you apply to Santa Clara, you use the Common App. We're on the Common App school. We're one of maybe 800 or 900 schools that utilize the Common App. The supplemental piece is where a student needs to designate what school they're applying to. The College of Arts and Sciences, which is our largest division, about 60% of the students are there. The business school is about 25%, and then engineering is the rest, about 15% or so. And so, the smaller schools, they're smaller, engineering is a little bit more competitive to get into. And so our advice is if a student wants a business major or an engineering major, they should apply directly to those schools, because from day one, they get into that kind of coursework. But as Jim was saying, they also have to take courses in the College of Arts and Sciences. So it's easier to be in either the business school or engineering and work with arts and sciences for a second major or minor. If you're in the College of Arts and Sciences, you have access to business or engineering minors. And so many students at Santa Clara double major, and minor, that kind of thing, but you just kind of have to be kind of strategic in how you go about it. And I saw another question in terms of when students need to declare a major. I think for most majors, it's towards the end of sophomore year that folks kind of put pressure on you to declare. But again, we're on the quarter system, things move quick. Our students change their mind quite a bit.
Thanks, AJ. We've had a couple of questions come in about on-campus visits and tours. At the moment and continuing through the fall, we will not be welcoming visitors to campus. We do offer virtual information sessions and student Q&As and virtual live campus tours online Monday through Friday, and are also beginning to offer them on Saturdays. So we encourage you and your students to join us for one of those sessions with our current student ambassadors. So it gives them a great perspective into what it's like to be a real student at Santa Clara. But no, we are not welcoming people onto campus right now. There was a question about being able to walk around campus on your own. We're not encouraging it. We're asking that you don't do it. I'm not sure anyone would kick you off if you were there, but we are encouraging you not to come to campus in order to protect our community members who do need to be on campus right now to do their jobs, or those who are living on campus. But if you were there, yes, please wear a mask. That is required at all times when you're on campus. So we've had a few more, questions come in, some about housing. I'll let any of you jump on this one if you'd like. A question about refunds or reduction in tuition as well for the fall. So students are not being charged for housing right now. They were not charged for housing in the spring if they're not living on campus. And there was, I guess, a slight reduction in tuition. There was going to be an increase in tuition in the fall, and they halted that increase for now. But does anyone want to talk a little bit about housing on campus and the different options that are available to students? AJ,
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in.
Jim, yeah, go for it.
With that, so we have at Santa Clara for first year students, we have a residential learning community system. So, we are moving actually to 2 years of required housing once things get back to normal, because we see such benefits for students living on campus. But this residential learning community, we have now 9 different communities. Each one is in a separate building. Each one has a theme. Each one has a resident director. Each one has a faculty member. One of them has 2 faculty members living there. And so based on the theme of the residential learning community, the style of housing, whether you want traditional dorm style, suite style living, there are lots of dimensions to help students choose which community they'd like to be a part of. Students would rank their choices. Most students get their first or second choice. So that has worked pretty well. And in those residential learning communities, in addition to programming and so forth, connected with that building and those themes, every student will have at least one, and most students will have a 2-class sequence that's connected to their residential learning community. So they're taking their critical thinking and writing, or their cultures and ideas, or their religion, theology, and culture class. Everybody in that class will also be a part of their residential learning community, the hall in which they're living. So it's much more than just a dorm. It really is intended to be a community where there's both living and learning going on.
Thanks, Jim. AJ, I'm going to throw another one back to you. We've had a couple questions come in about the possibility of double majoring or minoring in different schools, as well as transferring between the schools once you're at Santa Clara.
Sure. So, so again, as I was saying earlier, my advice to students is that if you have a major or you have an inclination that you want to major or minor in anything business related or engineering related, then really it does make sense and behooves you to apply directly to those schools, because from day one, business students take business courses and engineers get into engineering courses. They also have to take courses in the College of Arts and Sciences because, again, that's where sort of the general ed is housed. So again, it's easier if you're in those smaller divisions, although it's tougher to get into them. It's easier to be there and start there and work with arts and sciences for a second major or minor. If you're not in a school, then you have access to minors in that school, not majors. So in order to be a major, you need to be in that school, again, unless you're in arts and sciences. There were some other questions I saw to admission rates and things like that. For just generally speaking, broadly speaking, for any institution that offers early decision, what you would typically see is that if you're looking at their averages on a continuum, the early decision averages would probably be a little bit lower than the averages, because if any institution is saying, if a student is saying, hey, if I get in, I'm coming, then any institution really is going to sort of say, okay, well, if you're on the bubble or a little bit below, we're going to take a chance on you because you're committed. And so the acceptance rates for early decision are a little bit higher than general. Early action is our strongest applicant pool academically. They're off the charts because, again, they're not banking on progress in senior year. Our admit rate is higher for the early action group. It's not that your chances are better because you apply early. It's, again, there's just a strong pool. And then once you get to regular decision and we get the bulk of our applications, things kind of regress to the mean. And so my advice is, if you're looking at our more popular programs, computer science, engineering, business, you should probably be strong enough as an applicant to where you're considering applying early. So just something to think about.
Thanks, AJ. A couple quick questions I'll address. Somebody asked if business majors can take engineering classes. Students in any school can take a class in any other school. Students are allowed to have a minor in any of the 3 schools, no matter which school their major is under. So yes, you are able to take courses in other schools, and you will likely be required to take some classes in other schools, especially if you're not in the College of Arts and Sciences. Many of your core classes will fall under that school. Another quick question to answer, asking how many students start as first years and then graduate in 4 years. Our 4-year graduation rate is about 88%, which is one of the highest in the country. The national 4-year graduation rate is about 41%, so we're over double that. We are really committed to getting our students in and out in 4 years, and I think that is a really big benefit and really speaks to the value of a Santa Clara education and the return on investment you'll get if you come here, because your student can enter confident that they will get that degree in 4 years and be able to walk across the stage. Anne, I'm going to go ahead and pose another question to you. I know you spoke in your introduction about working with some of the internship opportunities through the Markkula Center, but you want to talk a little bit more about how the internship process works at Santa Clara and the opportunities that are available to students?
Sure. I mean, one of the really wonderful things about Santa Clara is its location. So we're right here in the heart of Silicon Valley, and we have a lot of relationships with Silicon Valley companies that we've sustained for many years. Local employers know our students, and they really value our students, to be honest, and the sort of unique qualities that they can really see in Santa Clara students, particularly around their orientation to coming into the companies quickly and figuring out how to be useful and helpful and serve well. And so a lot of the internships go through the Career Center, and they post them on a regular basis as they become open. And then we at the Markkula Center have some that are specific to ethics opportunities. Right now, some of our students are in the ethics and compliance functions within companies, but our internships can be in a variety of, marketing, product development, different parts of the company. As responsible use of technology is becoming a much more a hotter topic and an area of focus. And we are a multidisciplinary ethics center, so we also have internships in the healthcare space, We have students who, when we're not in COVID times, are actually in hospitals. They're shadowing physicians as they're making game time calls related to specific patients, and then coming back to the program, the class that they take together on campus to kind of digest what they've seen and think about the various ethical lenses that they're seeing used, and the realities of ethics in a professional setting in real time. So there's lots of different ways that students can get engaged with companies. I would say our students are really appreciative of the number of opportunities they get and the variety.
Thanks, Anne. Another couple quick admission related questions, both about acceptance rates. So the first one asking about the acceptance rate for computer science. We don't break it down by major. We consider students within the school, but overall our acceptance rate hovers around 48% each year. So about half the students who apply are admitted, but we don't break that down by individual majors. Although I will say computer science is the most popular program at Santa Clara. So if your student is interested, we would suggest and encourage them to apply with that specific major on the application rather than applying undecided within the school. A couple questions earlier on that I meant to address as well, asking about in-state versus out-of-state students and acceptance rates. All students receive the same consideration in the application process. There's no advantage to being an in-state student versus an out-of-state student. So it doesn't matter to us where you're coming from in terms of how we evaluate your application. They're all going to be considered equally. So Jim, I'll pose this one to you, asking about some advising programs and how are first-year students matched with advisors and helped along the way academically.
Sure. So first-year students will first encounter an advisor during the orientation process. So even before they get here, they'll be matched with an advisor who will help them think through their first quarter program. Those advisors will be from the school or program that they've been accepted into. So that will be their first touch with an advisor. Once they get on campus, students who have a major will be assigned a permanent advisor within that department and within that major that will help to guide them through. Students who are undeclared, and we do have a sizable number of undeclared majors. It's actually my favorite major. Because it sort of fosters that critical inquiry and exploration, will also be assigned a faculty advisor. So every incoming student will have a faculty advisor, whether or not they are in a specific academic program or undeclared. Many programs, particularly in the School of Business and Engineering, but other programs, psychology and communications, have developed peer advising programs. So first-year students will also have access to a more advanced student in the program to help them with that process. And then we have the Drama and Academic Advising Center, which serves all undergraduate students. And students can, whether or not they're in a program and have a faculty advisor, they can always meet with an advisor in the Drama Center, which is staffed both with professional full-time advisors, and there are several faculty who work part-time in there as well. So there's a number of places where students can get advising. In addition, pre-law, pre-health for students headed into medical fields, students looking to go into education. There are specific sort of interdisciplinary advising programs, and students may go on those career paths from a number of different majors that will help ensure that students have appropriate advising and academic preparation to apply for law school, for teaching credentials, for medical school, and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. AJ, I've seen a couple questions come in asking about different pieces of the application. So I feel like it might be beneficial for everyone to just give a quick overview of what exactly we're looking at in the application, the pieces that they need to submit, and how each of those is evaluated.
Okay. So again, we're a Common App school, and so transcripts are required. Letters of recommendation are part of it if you are a first-year applicant. And when I say first year, meaning the traditional, applying out of high school sort of freshman. If you're a transfer student, letters of recommendation are not a required part of the application. But it's pretty straightforward. If you take a look at our website, we literally list everything that we require. What I would recommend is that sometimes folks just look at the common application itself and say, okay, well, these are all the pieces of the common application. Make sure that you're looking at the particular school that you're applying to, because they will tell you, there are some pieces that you just don't need to submit for every school. And so for us, we on the student side, we're looking at what you are in control of, what you did in high school, the kind of school you're coming from. Did you challenge yourself? That kind of thing. How rigorous was your time at the institution you're coming from? Again, test scores are not a part of it. So academically, the big pieces are, your GPA, obviously, and then what you took at your high school. Did you challenge yourself? The personal side, your extracurriculars, there's no silver bullet. There's no one particular extracurricular we're looking for. We're just looking to see, are you an interesting person? As I said in the chat there to the question about the essays, what are we looking for? We're looking for interesting people. Would we want to talk to you? Would we want to be in class next to you? Would we want, to add you to the campus community, that kind of thing? And so again, we get applications from all over the world. We're a national school. We have students coming from all over the globe, all over the country. And so really, we're just looking for interesting people. But academically, you got to be in the ballpark.
Thanks, AJ. We only have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to pose one last question that I'll ask each of you to answer briefly. And then before we log off, some other quick reminders and other ways for you all to stay in touch with us and get other questions you may have answered. But lastly, could you each just talk a little bit about what you think makes Santa Clara such a special place, or what really is the advantage of a Santa Clara education compared to other schools?
Ladies first.
I think what makes us unique is our mission. And I think a lot of students are aware of it, even if it's not something that they've spent time, maybe they haven't looked it up on the website, but through this process of getting to know Santa Clara, they start to understand what the Ignatian tradition is and the community that we foster and the way that we try and provide experiential learning, opportunities and make connections that students can have both on campus and off campus. So I think that's probably the part that I'm always pleasantly surprised by, how well our student body reflects that.
Yeah, we'll build on that. I think that's exactly where I would go in as well. And I think it's not just students, I think it's faculty and staff. And that's part of the reason it works so well. But this is a community that very much shares Santa Clara's mission in terms of its Ignatian values. We talk about educating students of competence, competence, and compassion. And faculty and staff who work with students are really committed as a community to offering that experience to students. And so we really are in a shared mission for our students. We operate at a size, we're kind of a sweet spot. We're big enough to be able to do some pretty impressive things, but we're small enough that you're going to see people all over. Ann, AJ, and I were kind of randomly thrown in this, but we have all worked together and been in book discussion groups and just, various things. And that's so typical of the community for our students, but also for our faculty and staff. And we tend to stay here a really long time. And by the same token, our students come back. They're really committed. They're proud to be Broncos. They graduate, they come back, reunions and so forth. It's just a very strong community. And I think that's deeply rooted in who we are as a community.
Yeah, and for me, I agree with everything that was said. And in bigger picture, I just want folks to realize that, we're a private school. Of all the college students in the country, only about 20% attend private institutions, and cost is a big part of that. So we're one of those schools where you should apply, see if you get in, if what we offer is realistic, and go from there. I do think that our size, being a medium-sized school, we're not a tiny liberal arts college. We're not a big research school. We're sort of a good mix of both of those offerings, and kind of lean towards that smaller environment academically. Those were just return on investment kind of stats, right? 80% of our students graduate with at least one internship under their belt. Our job placement is phenomenal. The Bay Area, as you're probably aware, is one of the more expensive areas in the country to live, you have to be productive where we are, whether you're an art history major or business major or an engineer. So I think our physical location is pretty special, in that you can, for fun stuff to do, you can get off campus and do anything you can think of. But in terms of resources as well, our students really are in a very great environment.
Thank you all for those last couple questions. I'm going to enter an email right now in the chat. This is our general admission@scu.edu email. If you have questions after today's session, if we couldn't get to them on the panel, or if you think of them later on as you and your students continue throughout this process, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to help. I'll also just kind of emphasize again that you all received information about this panel because your students registered for our virtual open house week that runs from today through this coming Friday. There were a lot of questions about career opportunities, the business school, computer science. We have mock classes in a lot of these subjects, panels from our students to really hear what the student experience is like at Santa Clara, and then presentations from a lot of other departments on campus, as well as some videos that already live on our YouTube channel. And all of these sessions will be recorded for you and your students to watch later on. So please encourage them to join these sessions. You're welcome to sit with them. We do ask that you share a screen rather than logging on twice so that more people can join the live Zoom. But you are welcome to be on those sessions with your students. Thank you all again for taking time out of your day to join us to learn more about Santa Clara. We're so excited that you and your students are interested in Santa Clara University and are spending time learning more about us in this virtual environment. But we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, day, whatever time it is where you're joining us from. And thank you again for being with us. And thank you to AJ, Ann, and Jim for taking time out of your Sunday afternoon to share your perspective with all of us today. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your night.